like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the weeds also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from?" "An enemy did this," he replied. The servants asked him, "Do you want us to go and pull them up?" "No," he answered, "because while you are pulling the weeds, you may root up the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time, I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned. Then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn." The mustard seed. He told them another parable. "The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. Though it is the smallest of all your seeds, yet when it grows, it is the largest of the garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and perch in its branches." The yeast. He told them still another parable. "The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into a large amount of flour until it worked all through the dough." The study part. Children that only the angels may, in the end, be trusted to separate them. So great is Satan's power of deception that the weeds often really suppose themselves to be children of the kingdom. Many other parables and exhortations have this mingled condition in view. Indeed, it characterizes Matthew from chapter 13 to the end. The parable of the wheat and the weeds is not a description of the world, but of that which profess to be the kingdom. Not all unbelievers are called children of the devil. Only those who have willfully rejected the light are so designated. This will have its fulfillment at the end of the age when Christ returns to reign. The wicked will be destroyed. The church translated before the tribulation will be gathered into the millennial kingdom, together with those living believers who have survived the tribulation period, and the resurrected righteous men and women of all the previous ages. The parable of the mustard seed suggests the rapid but unsubstantial growth of the mystery aspects of the kingdom, from a small beginning to a great place on the earth. It was common practice to retain a lump of leavened or fermented dough from the former baking and use it to leaven new dough. Under the Mosaic law, however, yeast was forbidden in bread used in the Feast of Unleavened Bread and the Passover, and similar exclusion of yeast applied to offerings placed on the altar. The only exception were the use of yeast in the 2 wave loaves offered as first fruits, and some of the cakes of the bread offered with fellowship offerings. Yeast, which brings about fermentation, is uniformly regarded in Scripture as typifying the presence of impurity or evil. The 2 wave loaves representing Israel and the Gentiles as forming the church contain yeast in recognition of imperfections in the believers. The use of yeast in the flour seems intended likewise to represent evil within the kingdom of heaven. The teaching that yeast in this parable represents the beneficent influence of the gospel pervading the world has no scriptural justification. Nowhere in Scripture does yeast represent good. The idea of a converted world at the end of the age is contradicted by the presence of weeds among the wheat and bad fish among the good in the kingdom itself. Although biblical truth has a beneficial moral influence on the world, the mingling of yeast is not the method of divine salvation or enlargement of the kingdom. Weeds never become wheat. The parable is therefore a warning that true doctrine, represented by the flower, would be corrupted by false doctrine. Similarly, yeast is a symbolic or typical substance is always mentioned in the Old Testament in an evil sense. The use of the word in the New Testament explains its symbolic meaning. It is malice and wickedness, as contrasted with sincerity and truth. It is evil doctrine. In its threefold form of Pharisaism, Sadduceeism, and Heresiism, the yeast of the Pharisees was externalism in religion. Of the Sadducees, skepticism as to the supernatural and as to the scriptures. Of the Herodians, worldliness, a herald party among the Jews. The use of the word in Matthew 13:33 is congruous with its meaning elsewhere in the scriptures.